For years, Microsoft has treated Linux as a niche, a side project, a background player in the world of desktop computing. The strategy was simple: lean into Windows, lock in corporate users, push subscriptions, and assume that nobody serious would ever leave the Windows ecosystem. The idea that people would switch from Windows to Linux was treated as a joke, something only hardcore hobbyists and programmers would ever bother to do. Now, in 2026, something has changed. Leaks about Windows 12 have started to spread like wildfire. The more people read them, the more they start asking the same question: is this really worth it? And instead of waiting for Microsoft's official marketing, millions of users are voting with their mice. They are installing Linux on spare laptops, on work machines, even on the home PC that was supposed to stay on Windows forever. This is the moment Microsoft's worst fear is coming true: that enough people start leaving, that the Windows era quietly begins to erode at the edges. The leaks about Windows 12 do not come from one single source. They come from internal documents, partner briefings, and early build notes that found their way into public channels. Together, they paint a unified picture. Windows 12 is not just an upgrade to Windows 11. It is a full-on re-engineering effort to lock Microsoft deeper into your machine, your data, and your behavior. Some of the most controversial leaks include mandatory Microsoft account woven even tighter into the setup. Windows 11 already forced most users into a Microsoft account. Windows 12 reportedly takes that further, tying your hardware identity, odds your login sessions, and key local features more tightly to your Microsoft account. The default experience is that if you use Windows 12, Microsoft will always know who you are, even when you are offline. Copilot integrated into almost every core interface. Leaks suggest Copilot is no longer just a sidebar or a separate app. It is expected to be baked into the Start menu, the File Explorer, the Settings app, and even into context menus when you right-click on files. Everything you do, from opening a folder to moving a document, could be watched, analyzed, and logged as part of Microsoft's AI-driven telemetry pipeline. Increased telemetry and privacy by consent that feels less optional. The leaked roadmap hints at more aggressive data collection, with settings that present privacy as a series of recommendations instead of real choices. The default is expected to be maximum data sharing. Opting out may still be technically possible, but it will be buried in menus, hidden behind warnings, or blocked by enterprise policies that normal users cannot change. More ads and in-OS monetization. Windows 11 already has ads, promotions, and partner offers sprinkled across the Start menu, lock screen, and settings. The leaks suggest Windows 12 will double down on that, turning more of the user interface into a revenue stream. The logic is simple: Microsoft needs new ways to boost revenue, and the easiest way is to turn Windows itself into a giant ad delivery platform. Reduced flexibility for power users and custom setups. Microsoft has been tightening control over how Windows is configured. Leaks indicate that Windows 12 may remove or restrict certain legacy options, registry tweaks, and third-party configuration tools that advanced users have relied on to keep their machines clean and fast. The goal is consistency and lock-in. The side effect is that Windows becomes less customizable and more managed by Microsoft, not by the user. For millions of ordinary users, reading these leaks felt like confirmation of a trend they already sensed. Windows is becoming less about empowering individuals and more about building a centrally controlled, AI-driven, ad-funded platform that Microsoft can monetize forever. The more this leak-based story spreads, the more people start asking, is this really worth it? The most important part of this story is not the leaks themselves, it's the reaction. Instead of ignoring them, people are acting. Linux distributions are seeing a clear uptick in downloads, tutorials, and forum activity. Beginner-friendly distros like Ubuntu, Linux Mint, and Zorin OS are getting more views than they have in years. Tech review sites report that readers are specifically asking, which Linux distro should I use if I'm leaving Windows 12? This is not random curiosity. This is behavioral migration, the same kind of shift you see when a product stops being good enough and starts feeling like a bad trade-off. Users are reacting to several concrete driving factors: privacy and control. Linux, in most of its mainstream forms, does not ship with a mandatory account system that ties your identity to every action on the machine. Linux does not spy on you by default. Linux does not force you to log into a cloud service just to browse files. For users who are wary of Microsoft's increasingly aggressive data collection, Linux offers a clean, transparent alternative. Performance on older hardware. Linux is far lighter than modern Windows builds. An old laptop that struggles to run Windows 11 often feels faster and more responsive under Linux. As Windows 12 leaks suggest even heavier system requirements, people are realizing that migrating to Linux is not just symbolic, it is a practical upgrade. Freedom from forced updates. Windows updates are notorious for breaking things, changing layouts, and forcing unwanted features. Linux, in contrast, tends to be more stable and predictable. You choose your distro, you choose your software, you decide when and how to update. You can keep your desktop exactly the way you like it for years. So without worrying about Microsoft suddenly redesigning everything in the name of a new AI-driven workflow. The rise of Linux-friendly software. Linux used to be a second-class citizen when it came to professional tools. Today, that is changing. Major browsers, office suites, design tools, and even some games now run on Linux. The barrier to entry is lower than it has ever been. For many people, the switch is no longer, can I do my work on Linux? But why haven't I tried this sooner? All of this is happening at the same time. Microsoft is pushing Windows 12 as a forced evolutionary step. The result is a perfect storm. Microsoft is signaling that Windows is becoming more locked in and more invasive, while Linux is signaling that it is becoming more user-friendly, more private, and more flexible. The more people read the Windows 12 leaks, and the more they start seeing Linux not as a rebellion, but as a sensible escape route. Microsoft's worst fear is not that Linux will replace Windows on every PC. The company knows that is unlikely. Microsoft's worst fear is that enough people start leaving that Windows dominance phrase at the edges, and once that starts, the slide becomes self-reinforcing. Here is how that scenario works. A small group of users, privacy-focused, technically curious, or just frustrated, start experimenting with Linux. They find that Linux actually works for their needs. Maybe they keep one machine on Windows for compatibility, but they move secondary devices, work laptops, and home machines to Linux. Word spreads. Friends notice. IT-savvy coworkers talk about it. Tech influencers make videos. The I switched to Linux, and it's better than Windows 11 narrative gains traction. As more people adopt Linux, the software developers start paying more attention to the Linux ecosystem. More apps arrive, more tools are updated. Linux becomes more polished and more mainstream. Meanwhile, Microsoft's Windows 12 strategy pushes further in the opposite direction. More lock-in, more ads, more telemetry, more AI-driven friction. The gap between what users want and what Windows offers grows wider. The exodus accelerates. Not everyone switches, but enough people do that Microsoft starts seeing erosion in key markets, education, small businesses, creative professionals, developers, and hobbyists. This is the exact scenario Microsoft has been quietly trying to avoid for years. The company has invested heavily in Windows compatibility, in driver ecosystems, in DirectX, and in developer tools, all to keep people inside the Windows ecosystem. Microsoft has spent years downplaying Linux, quietly discouraging OEMs from shipping Linux-based PCs, and making sure that Windows remains the default choice for almost everyone. Windows 12 leaks are the moment that fear is coming true. Because the leaks are not just technical documents, they are a marketing catastrophe. They give anti-Windows sentiment a concrete focal point. They allow critics to say, look, this is not speculation. Here's what Microsoft is actually planning. The leaks are the matches that light the fire Microsoft has quietly been dreading. Microsoft is not standing still. The company is quietly doing everything it can to contain the damage. Some of the tactics include downplaying the leaks. Microsoft has repeatedly said that early designs are not final and that plans can change. The idea is to distance the company from the worst-case interpretations of the Windows 12 features. The leaks are framed as concepts, not commitments. Highlighting AI and productivity benefits. When talking about Windows 12, Microsoft emphasizes AI-driven productivity, better integration with Microsoft 365, and smoother workflows for enterprise users. The company wants users to see Windows 12 as innovation, not surveillance. Pushing Copilot-centric messaging. Microsoft is trying to reframe the Windows 12 narrative around Copilot, so the idea is that the AI-driven features are the real value, and the lock-in side effects are just implementation details. Microsoft wants users to think, this is cool AI, not, this is a surveillance machine. Bolstering the Windows brand. Advertising campaigns emphasize security, reliability, and compatibility, the same old Windows tropes. Microsoft wants to convince people that Windows is still the safest, most stable, most compatible choice, and that Linux is still risky, fragmented, and niche. But none of this is working as well as Microsoft wants. The leaks are too specific, too detailed, and too coherent. The more Microsoft tries to downplay them, the more people see that as embarrassment, not reassurance. The gap between what Microsoft is saying and what the leaks are showing is becoming too wide to ignore. If you are sitting in front of a Windows machine, wondering whether any of this matters to you, the answer is yes. Because Windows 12, as leaked, is not just a technical roadmap. It is a blueprint for how your computer will treat you over the next several years. If you value control, you should care about the deeper mandatory account integration. If you value privacy, you should care about the expanded telemetry and AI-driven monitoring. If you value stability, you should care about heavier system requirements and reduced flexibility for custom setups. If you value choice, you should care about Microsoft's attempt to make leaving Windows harder. At the same time, Linux is becoming more attractive than it has ever been. It is no longer a hacker-only platform. It is a real, usable alternative for people who are tired of Windows direction. The fact that thousands of people are already downloading Linux, setting it up, and using it as their daily driver is a sign that this is not fringe behavior anymore. You do not have to switch overnight. You do not have to throw away your Windows license. But you should at least be aware of the option. You should at least experiment. You should at least know that if Microsoft pushes Windows 12 in the direction the leaks suggest, you have an alternative, and that alternative is becoming more mainstream every day. The smart move right now is not to panic, but to be prepared. Do not wait until Windows 12 is forced onto your machine. Do not wait until you have no choice. Instead, treat this moment as a wake-up call. Try a Linux Live USB. Boot a Linux distro from a USB drive on your current Windows machine. See how it feels. Test your browser, set documents, and media. You do not have to install it. You just have to see that it works. Evaluate your actual needs. Ask yourself what you actually need Windows for. Is it gaming? Is it a specific piece of professional software? Is it nothing in particular, just a habit? If you rely on Windows for only a few key applications, you can keep a dual boot setup or use a virtual machine. That does not solve the privacy issue, but it reduces your exposure. Plan for a potential switch. If you ever decide that privacy, control, or performance is more important than Microsoft's ecosystem lock-in, start planning now. Back up your data. Learn the basics. Install a lightweight Linux distro on a spare machine or an old laptop. Get comfortable with the idea that you can leave Windows when you want to. Microsoft is betting that people will stay, that people will accept the ads, the telemetry, the Copilot prompts, the mandatory account, and the heavier system requirements. But millions of people are starting to wonder whether that bet is still worth it. The Windows 12 leaks are the moment that Microsoft's worst fear is coming true, not as a sudden, overnight collapse, but as a quiet, steady migration of users who are choosing to take control of their own machines.